Ravnica is a world defined by its guilds, 10 powerful factions, each rooted in a unique philosophy, form the backbone of the city's sprawling society. In theory, their relationships should be simple. Guilds that share a color should be allies, while those that don't should be natural enemies. I'll name them after each other, each sharing a color with the next, to show you how they might or might not be friends. With the Azorius, who have been locking up anyone who might possibly commit a crime in the future. They're the controlling faction of order and structure in white and blue. The Orzhov, who influence the other guilds through deals, money and power. They build their own structure and influence power on others, in black and white. The Dimir, who have eyes literally everywhere, yes, literally. Even though most have been wiped out, almost none of them have been wiped out, in blue and black. The Izzet, who are still burning the city, but now they're also the ones that need to build it back up with their engineer powers, in red and blue. The Rakdos are also still the same, looking for chaos and enjoying the murderous shows going on in the city in black and red. The Golgari, who don't see the light of day, who've been shunned for helping the fractions into Ravnica, but really they were just the easiest to control and were always part of life. Now they have accepted their roles as stone cold killers in green and black. The Gruul smash in red and green. The Boros have been getting ready for the next threat. They were honored for defending Ravnica so well during the previous wars, but really they've taken a beating. They don't mind though, as it made them more agile in white and red. Selesnya's foundations have been shaken too. Now their leaders have become openly murderous. They've probably always been like this, but now they have reason to show it, in green and white. And the Simic, who have been slurping too much oil, for science of course, but still you shouldn't do that. Although to the Simic the oil's rapid change was a welcome experiment, now the Simic are mostly hated by other guilds. The Simic are in blue and green. And all these names I've gilded, or guilds I've named, after each other share a color. So they should be friends, but the reality is far more complicated. Power, history and survival shape these guilds in ways that go beyond their colors. Some sworn enemies find themselves forced into uneasy cooperation, while others who should be allies are locked in bitter rivalries. Even within a single color, the differences in ideology run deep. Two guilds might both value order, but one enforces it through law while the other controls it through wealth and power. And in this video we're diving into the tangled web of guild politics, examining how color identity plays out in practice and where philosophy meets reality. To understand this, we'll break down some of the most, or all of the most, fascinating and unexpected relationships in Ravnica, starting with an example: the Selesnya and the Golgari. In color philosophy, the Golgari and the Selesnya should be relative friends. They should have different manners because of their enemy colors white and black, but they should be allies in some ways at least, because they share the color of preserving nature. When we look at the Selesnyan flavor on this Gruul, we see a representation. The Selesnya respect Golgari expansion and compare it to their own growth, but the fact that their ways of growth are so different alienates the two guilds almost without repair. There are also some similarities. Both guilds have elves. Many conclave elves have been cast out to find a place among the Golgari. They must have found another place where life is the most important focus, and they've accepted that the Golgari view life and death as the same thing. But the conclave doesn't see it this way. Seize is a Golgari card that shows us how the Golgari use the physical remains of the dead to fuel life. Desist is its Selesnyan flip side that shows us how the conclave feels like life stops after death. Your consciousness is uploaded to the world soul and your physical body stops to exist. It will be buried out of sight for the Golgari to probably reclaim your buried body. The two guilds view their creatures very differently. The Golgari Terrace Worm is an undead one. The Golgari leave it be. knowing that it will die somewhere to feed nutrients into the ground. They care about the creature because it is part of the cycle, and they'd leave it be because they think it should live out its life. The Selesnyans, on the other hand, tame their worms. They shape nature in their vision, to help it fit in with their community and with the city as a whole. Giving the worms armor also tells us that the Conclave wants its worms to survive. The worms even work together, because no one in the Conclave works alone. The two guilds eventually came together during the War of the Spark. Even though their outlook on life, death and nature is almost opposite, they still look at the same reality. And when put under immense pressure, the guilds would still prefer preservation over their values. So if they have to, the two ally-colored guilds would follow their color theory. Now let's look at two guilds that work together but also are opposed at the same time. In fact, the two guilds do share one color and have one enemy color, like the Golgari and the Selesnya did. The Selesnya and the Azorius share the white color, and green and blue are opposite from each other as enemies. The Selesnya Conclave knows that this order is something that they respect, and the Azorius do as well, but they do differ on many philosophical grounds. I would say the goal for the two guilds is the same, but the methods are completely opposed. Both guilds try to bring unity and order, but the Conclave tries to do this by removing the ego and the intellect for a singular mind. The Azorius try to use that same intellect to build a structure of laws that should remove the need for thinking, while also making use of the minds that they have under their employ. That's also why the Azorius demand for laws and produce to be made. They think about what should be built and build it no matter what, while the Selesnya work with whatever is possible to produce. They look at nature and its shapes and help shape it into a uniform shape. In this way, the two guilds find another common goal outside of the color philosophy: city planning. The Azorius are said to be the best architects. They think and plan centuries ahead if they can, and they love to shape the city because they view it as a simple system to be shaped. The Selesnya use their planning skills so that there can be enough room for every living being. Every tree needs to have appropriate space away from other trees so that they can grow. The Selesnya would love to build every piece of the city around that philosophy. And in this way, the two guilds indirectly or directly work together on building their city, or at least on planning to build that city. But there's still a lot of conflict between the two guilds. Although the two guilds could never get a grip on one another, I explained in Selesnya's own video how the Conclave uses clever tactics whenever they need to be aggressive. The peaceful guild can't just declare the Azorius an enemy while they're relatively peaceful themselves. And the Azorius can't get a grip on the Selesnya because they need to track every single spore, and there's just too much of the Conclave. That could become a danger sometime in the future, while most of the time they seem to be peaceful too. That's why in Murders of Karlov Manor no one noticed Tostani being a mass murderer. We see the difference between the guilds most clearly in their shared creature type, the birds. The Azorius birds are roaming the city to grab whoever looks guilty. In a way, they're way more proactive than you might at first expect from the Azorius. Their rocks are taught to find crime and fight it. Selesnyan birds are bred to be defensive. They get their own armor like Selesnyan worms get, and they mostly fight for their homes with the loyalty to the Conclave. They don't follow any rules other than attacking on sight when someone gets too close. Doesn't feel too Selesnyan, but actually it is. So then we had Selesnya Golgari, Selesnya Azorius, but what if we pair Golgari and Azorius? Well, then in the color wheel we see that we have two exactly opposed guilds, and this is actually the most interesting type of guild relation you will find, because these guilds should be enemies, but most of the time they let each other be. If they do touch each other, then there will be a war. So while they could be further apart like Rakdos and the Azorius, Color-wise, in the story the two guilds are mortal enemies whenever they meet. This is because the Azorius are a friendly colored guild that are as far as possible removed from the enemy colored Golgari. More in this way later with the other 4 mortal enemy guilds. The Azorius strive to watch over the city. They want to be high in the sky, looming over the city and controlling it. They imagine laws and exert them. Meanwhile, the Golgari live far removed from the city because they are outcast by them. They live under the city, ignoring its machinations mostly and focusing on what is real to them. The cycle of life and death feeding Ravnica's ground so that life can continue. But the biggest tension springs forth from a leadership style. The Azorius follow a structure of hierarchy. Your role is the most important and you listen to whoever is above you. Even the guildmaster has to follow the rules created by their own guild. The Golgari just follow whoever has more power. It's a constant struggle that fuels the cycle on its own. Vraska from the Golgari eventually killed the Azorius guildmaster Esperia. Esperia had ordered Azorius guards to attack the Golgari, because they were becoming too strong. And when Vraska asked her if she'd feel regret, Esperia said that it was the right choice. Esperia is now a statue that may feed the ground of Ravnica for centuries to come. The thing is that the two guilds aren't really directly at war with each other. The Golgari look at the law of life and death, and the Azorius make their own rules. The two guilds usually don't even see each other. Even these enemy colors with their history of hostilities can and must live together. And the two guilds do understand this. Without the Golgari, the Azorius would have no foundation, and without the Azorius, the Golgari would have no house. But let's look at 2 completely different guilds that have a different relation with each other and tie them to our triangle. The Gruul and the Boros share the red color and differ between green and white, 2 friendly colors. Both guilds share a sense of community and a strong will to fight, but their values differ completely. These 2 guilds are constantly at war, while they should be friends according to their color philosophy. The 2 guilds do respect each other, so when they look at each other they see a proper fighting guild. The Gruul often display Boros bodies proudly after defeating them in battle, which is actually a friendly offer. The Boros meanwhile recruit strong Gruul fighters whenever they fit in their ranks well enough. The 2 guilds still ended up on different sides of multiple wars. The most glaring moment was in the invasion from Nicobolas, where the Gruuls chose to side with the dragon god because of the wreckage he promised and had shown them. And the Boros fought against the hordes because of their sense of duty for their city. And here is the crux. Ravnica is a city plane, and any guild affiliated with chaos and destruction of the city will eventually fight guilds that stand to defend it. The Boros see passion, which is red, and view it as a tool. They would use it to strengthen their armies so that they can fight together for the cause. The Gruul view passion and their elementals as what drives their being. Why would you do anything without passion? If you want, do. With all of the red guilds, the battle tactics of the guilds are weirdly showing through the goblins of the guilds. Note that all red guilds and an extra guild use goblins in their armies. They just love to fight. And where the Gruul let the goblins go follow their nature, the Boros try to tame them. They need to fit in as much as possible. Even if they can't carry a flag or stand upright, the Boros will try to force them. Weirdly, the Boros use Viashino to lead the fray. The Gruul know that the lizard people love to hide in the shadows. They use stealth, naturally, and even though most Gruul view them as cowards, they still let them be that in their guild. The Boros give them a set of armor so that the Viashino can fulfill any role needed within the legion. With enough armor, even the cowards become bold warriors in the legion. Both factions fight, but in a really different manner. The Gruul would let any being do what they are meant to do, even if it goes against their philosophy. And the Boros force any creature to do what they need them to do, because they must fit their own philosophy. Together, the two fighters' guilds would see mostly their passion. They think of something else when asked what's the right thing to do, but they both do before they think. They fight for what's right and let the Azorius argue over the details. The Selesnya and the Boros have the same relationship. In this case, the Boros stand against the Selesnyans in the same way as they stand against the Gruul. They share the color white, making them respect each other's value of unity and community, and their other colors red and green are friends too. But we see a divide here. The green and red colors should be friendly because they don't strive for perfection. They should be about unique quirks of individuals. But while this is true, as the Boros value your unique ability to fight, and the Selesnya accept differences because any living being belongs to Selesnya, the two guilds still prefer unity coming from their white color over individuality. I think the most glaring difference between the guilds is between the Boros elementals that are made to attack, their beings of fire and passion that are controlled to be in the Legion, while the Selesnya's elementals are sanctuaries and statues that have come to life through slow cultivation. They're careful not to hurt nature. Both elementals are great assets in war, but out of really different positions. The Boros are made to fight, the Selesnya grow to defend. The only tension between the Selesnya and the Boros in color is the Boros red against the Selesnya white. The Boros feel this tension in their own guild already, red and white, switching between order and passion. The Selesnya view the Boros passion as something that will die down eventually when the Legion is ready to be embraced by Mod Selesnya. The Boros always feel like there is a competition, but they especially feel like there is a competition between their air battalions of bird-flying skyjacks and the Pegasus Knights of the Selesnya. It befits the Boros soldiers who are daring fighters for their guild. They do anything to show their conviction, that the Legion is strong and bright. But the Equinauts know that Selesnya is superior in the air. They fight together with all of their guild. They're strengthened by the many knights behind them and know that two wings don't make a flight. And in a way the Boros know this difference too. Aurelia, guild leader of the Boros and soul of battle, knows that open war with the Conclave is a death wish, because as a whole they're close to unbeatable, and even Aurelia respects that strength. But through this respect the two guilds found each other during the War of the Spark. When zombies attacked their city, the Boros soldiers knew that distracting them would be enough, as they were being backed by the Selesnya and Ledef Knights. They trusted not only on their own region, but on the strength of the Conclave to back them up. In a way, the unity and the Boros and the Selesnya feel extends to the other guilds. Even though they don't agree on almost anything, they're still drawn to each other by this oneness. Whether it's through offense or defense, the Loxodon of Ravnica feel attached to this unity of the two guilds. The stubborn people join them so that they can fight for their city. The elephants are always independent groups within their guilds, but they're always there for their people as well. And I think they're the best symbol for the friendship between these two guilds. The Selesnya and the Gruul round up this triangle of control. And I call these triangles of control because all of the guilds in these triangles, where we have one enemy colored pair and two friendly colored pairs together, do often control each other. The Selesnya and the Gruul share the same relationship between their colors as they do with the Boros in some ways. The guilds share the three colors of white, red and green. But in this case the two guilds share the colors green, meaning they should agree on values of nature and strength. Their other colors, white and red, are very much at odds, which expresses in a tension between the guilds. And in this case, both guilds don't have the tension inside of their own guilds. The Gruul want nature to be free, the Selesnya want to shape nature, and this difference is very clear as a point of tension that made the two guilds become enemies, even though they should be relative friends. The only thing holding them together are the Boros, who are keeping the triangle together, as you will see happens with all of these triangles. One interesting starting fact is that the Zur-Ta clan employs Selesnyan healers for their people. The Gruul still care about other Gruul, but like this Surta Ancient's flavor says, the Selesnyan elves just haven't seen the wilds for themselves. Why would nature want to be orderly if on its own it will resolve into free wildness? Where the Boros found a sense of respect with both guilds, out of passion or out of unity, the Gruul and the Selesnyans just don't agree. Selesnyan centaurs would rather find peaceful times. They want to tend to their gardens, caring for nature. Meanwhile, Gruul centaurs find nature within themselves. They want to trample society and trust nature to take over after them. While the Selesnyans leave space for nature, Gruul centaurs take it. A Gruul warrior would never let an elf hold the people away. It would just trample over anyone that stands in their way. They'd think of Selesnyan centaurs as weaklings for this transgression against their nature. The Gruul fight a very clear war against the Selesnyan ideals. Not just because they hate how their trees look, but because the Selesnyans seem to be easy prey and their buildings are a blight to look at. Of course, the Gruul don't see that while one Selesnya is weak, the Conclave is still strong as a unity. The Conclave fights a different kind of war. They sap nutrients from Gruul grounds. They send centaurs, beings of nature, mind you, to speak with them. But here the Selesnyans lose and win at the same time. The Selesnyan centaurs have found that the only way to convert a Gruul member is to speak in the language of war. The centaurs come to fight the Gruul, and in doing this, they lose their own essence of peace. In a way, these centaurs are already becoming Gruul as they come into their grounds. So, the two really can't hurt each other. The Gruul don't understand Selesnyan words, and the Gruul don't understand the Selesnyan strength either. Meanwhile, the Selesnyans try to expand the wilds, but when its creatures become too wild, they lose too much order. The guilds need each other, and I think a similar respect can be found exactly because of this tension, even though the two guilds don't feel that respect yet. I want to point out that the machinations of this triangle between the Gruul, the Selesnyans and the Boros, the guilds find a distant respect with the Boros, the enemy-colored guild. But between the two friendly-colored guilds, there's a tension of war. Let's finish another triangle to see if we find a pattern. You saw the Selesnya with the Azorius before. The Simic guild finishes this triangle as the enemy-colored guild, just like the Boros did. The two friendly-colored guilds were at odds with each other. The Selesnya and Azorius are completely opposed in some ways, while like nature for Selesnya and Gruul, the Selesnya and Azorius both want order and silence. The two guilds completely disagree on how to get there, through planning or through finding peace in nature and the Selesnyan world soul. Now the Simic and the Selesnya, because yes, they share the green color, but the flavor of their bond card puts it best. They agree that life should flourish, but they disagree on the amount of limbs necessary to get there. The thing is, while the Simic do want more limbs and disrespect nature in that manner, the Selesnyans disrespect nature by taming it and by making it fit into their city plans. Both guilds want to shape nature, and like with the Boros, who understood Selesnya's struggle with their red chaos, the Simic understand the Selesnyan struggle with their blue philosophy of shaping nature. The Selesnyans understand the Simic's drive for perfection, because they too want to shape nature. It's just for different reasons. I think we see the best piece of difference when we compare elves. The Simic elves love nature, but they want to stew evolution forward. They look at an individual being and see their imperfections, or they see ways to grow. They see a finished product instead of the living being in front of them. Look at this elf and their eel. That's not the look of love. You could see pride for their creation or contempt for the weakness in their hand, but it's not a love for the being in front of them. It's a love for the concept it could represent. A potential. The Selesnya elf grows up raising one wolf pup from birth to becoming their mount. Yes, they look at a potential mount and they teach the pup to become something unnatural, but they also view the living being as its own thing. It will eventually grow to be a big wolf, big enough at least. The most important part is your connection with it, and that should be the thing that you shape. You protect them, you teach them, but you don't really change them, and you'd never discard them. different philosophies, but again a distant respect and a common goal of growth. Let's finish this triangle and see whether the Azorius and the Simic also find a distant respect for each other. They share the color blue for their order and structure. While this is more deeply rooted in Azorius, the Simic still work according to rules and bureaucracy. But there is a real tension here. From the Simic's blue focus on experimentation that seems to create the chaos that the Azorius hate, the Azorius should love blue as a color, but with the Simic it creates tension. This is why Ravnica is more complicated than a color wheel. The guilds have their own personalities, and while the two should be friendly rivals, there is again an all-out war here, where the Selesnyans and the Simic have found a common cause. The Azorius try to restrict experimentation from the Simic. They create complex laws like Article 5.8.2 stating restraint of arms, legs, claws, jaws, tails, tentacles and tendrils, forgetting for example wings or fins, although I'm sure there's an article in their laws for that too now. Meanwhile, the Simic love to hinder the Azorius because they are stopping their ever-changing evolution. The Azorius to them are just another hurdle or a chance for evolution, because control gives you a reason to evolve. In this way, the Simic still just respect the Azorius, even though they're constantly fighting. Most Simic would prefer for the Azorius to take the lead over the surface dwellers, so that the Simic can experiment in peace down in the seas. But we do see as well how this triangle keeps check on each other, where the Selesnya had the Azorius and their different ways of finding order. Now the Selesnyans and Simic found different ways of controlling nature, and the Azorius and the Simic are looking at a way to balance, just looking at how the perfect world should be. Their philosophies change and they think differently about thinking itself. Red guilds have goblins, green guilds have elves, and blue guilds have Fedalken. These are really intelligent and quirky beings, loving structure and time to think. The Fedalken join their guilds out of different reasons. They would join the Azorius seeking the complex structure and the need for silence. They love to restrict others so that careful decisions can be made, forcing everyone to be more like the Fedalken. With the Simic Gyre Engineer, we see the opposite. He joined the Simic because he likes to look at the current complex structure and watch for possibilities outside of it. These Fedalken still watch and contemplate, but they'd love for beings to be less like Fedalken, which is honestly very Fedalken of them. And lastly, with every white guild against a green one, we see their views upon nature. The Azorius see the value of nature, birds are great spies and trees are great for recreation. But the Simic respect nature while they implore them to do their bidding. Yes, but because it's in the nature of the creature as well. Or it could be in their future nature. Let's look at another simple but different triangle before we get to the complex structures of Ravnica. The Dimir and the Simic form its base. They share the color blue, but Simic's green stands directly against both Dimir colors. Dimir's ruthless planning for selfish gains stand against any need to preserve nature. Still, both guilds do have touch points. Flotsam and Jetsam are two kinds of shipwrecks. Both guilds are naturally destructive for society and have to hide most of their work for the people of Ravnica. The difference between the kinds of shipwrecks is that Flotsams are goods that come from a sunken vessel and that have floated to the surface. Jetsam are goods that have been intentionally thrown overboard. Both guilds perform future planning to the extreme, but the Simic do it naturally because goods need to float, while the Dimir have no limits to their planning as long as it's in their own self-interest. We see this difference in the shapeshifters of the guilds. The Dimir use intentional magic, learned over centuries to turn into other beings, using their identities as disguises for their guild leaders. The Simic see the ability to shapeshift as another piece of evolutionary advantage. It's just like growing another claw or leg, or perhaps like the ability to turn invincible. invisible is what I meant. In very different manners, the two guilds have grown into some of the strongest spy networks on Ravnica. While the Dimir have appreciated the use of insects and have learned what they could from the biomancers so that they could use the critters as spy tools and destructors of nature, the two guilds are irrevocably at war. Because, intentionally or not, the Dimir have killed a very important Simic leader, creating tension in the Combine and forever destroying any chance at peace between the guilds. And where the Simic touched the Dimir on blue, the Golgari touched them on the black color. The thing is that their approach is again really different. The black color in the Golgari shows up their decentralized leadership. The swarm switches leaders like it's nothing as long as they're the most powerful. The Dimir have had two leaders for the time we've known them, but still the guild is decentralized. It has a huge blue structure of small groups who lead another small groups of Dimir agents. Almost no one knows each other and everyone distrusts everyone. The two guilds are physically very close to each other. The two guilds live in the Undercity beneath Ravnica, but their way of living is very different. The Dimir use the Undercity as a place to hide, where no one cares about their shady dealings. To the Golgari, the Undercity is their home, because in any other place Golgari members would be attacked. Both guilds deal in shades, so they understand each other and know the dangers of the other guild. But that's exactly why they take their distance. The Golgari are useful to the Dimir, because the Dimir kill a lot of people and the Golgari run the Dead Bridge, which is basically a huge hole in the ground where you can dump your trash or bodies. The Golgari will take your trash and use it to fuel their cycle of life and death. But other than this symbiotic relationship, the two guilds hate each other. The Dimir do avoid the Golgari, which can get hard when the swarm is so huge, but whenever they do meet face to face, they fight. We looked at the way the Simic and the Dimir use bugs, right? The same difference can be seen here. The Dimir use their bugs to spy on Ravnica and so do the Golgari. But where the Golgari form bonds with their spiders, wearing them on their bodies and using pheromones to send them on missions, the Dimir magically control the bugs. They're essentially spying machines. The Dimir do not care about the lives of their spies, insect or otherwise. This triangle of Dimir, Golgari and Simic is different, because with the Simic and Golgari, green and black and blue are very opposed. We're looking at two enemy colored guilds and one friendly colored guild, where with the Boros, the Selesnya and the Gruul connected with the Boros. The Dimir keep the other guilds away. They share a color of mana but never a full-on philosophy. There's just too much tension between the guilds. The two enemy colored guilds of such a triangle should be friends. The Golgari and the Simic share the green color and their secondary colors are black and blue. Two friendly colors. The thing is that while the Golgari understand the massive difference between life and death, and the Simic understand the huge divide between nature and experimentation, the two guilds don't understand the internal battle the other guild has as well. See, the Golgari don't understand why the Simic just don't care to understand the simple truth. They see that the Simic are looking for something else, so close to being true to nature, but to the Golgari the Simic are just too dumb to see that they're already perfect. The Simic see how the Golgari are power hungry and how they insist that things have to die. The Simic don't think that dying is a boon to any living being and don't understand that part of the Golgari way of living or dying at all. The result is that the two guilds are constantly at war. The Golgari zombies and Crawl have been attacking Zonods close to their homes and the Simic keep attacking back. They even created trolls that love to eat Crawl by combining them with frogs, who of course love to eat flies. Where the Dimir shunned the two other guilds, the Simic and the Golgari are in an all-out war. The guilds completely understand a half of the other guild's philosophy, but their difference is just too great. They do balance each other out. The Dimir would have free game without plotting from the other two guilds. The Golgari would grow into a huge mass without the Simic evolving to defeat and eat them, and please don't let the Simic create something that lives forever. Let the allure of power keep them down, through their own corruption and decay. See, Ravnica's structure isn't just a collaboration, it's a constant balance of guilds pushing each other down and helping each other up. No one guild can get too strong. Let's look at a more defined example of these triangles with the Selesnya, Golgari and Orzhov. Starting with Selesnya and the Orzhov. The Selesnya are a guild all about preservation of their members. They value life way more than death. Selesnya and cultists should follow the guild's directions faithfully, just like the Orzhov force you to do. But the Orzhov use contracts, while the Selesnyans just take away your ego and replace it with a sense of unity. First of all, we see the difference between the guilds and their split cards. This is often the most clear pointer for a guild relation. In this case, the Selesnyans are ready to serve. It's not even a question, they just do. The Orzhov in a way must be willing. They do something for the syndicate because it's at first their own desire. They're at first willing. I love to point out where I'm wrong a bit, because the Orzhov and the Selesnya do work together. They share a museum, which the Selesnyans guard because they love to control the history of Ravnica. History, in a sense, is a shared consciousness after all. The Orzhov have paid for the museum because they want to seem culturally active, or that's the only reason we know of. But more than anything, there is a subtle war going on underneath the less subtle one, and will show you that one in a bit. The Selesnya soldiers have a strong sense of duty for their friends from the Conclave. Meanwhile, the Orzhov try to corrupt them, or force them to listen in other ways. The Selesnyans have been seen to lure Orzhov debtors in with the promise of a clean slate. It does not matter who you are after all, because you're just a child of Mad Selesnya. Less subtle is the real direct war between the guilds. The Orzhov poison Selesnya soldiers, and the Selesnyans send huge worms to attack Orzhov markets. It's not a secret that the two guilds love to fight each other, because the Selesnyans' dislike for the Orzhov is made from the tendency to focus on individuality, and the Orzhov can't stand the way in which the Selesnyans never choose for their own good. How can you buy someone's loyalty when they don't want anything? Very obviously, the two guilds control each other. The Orzhov feel like they're always one step ahead, having the Selesnyans attack the Golgari, for example. And the Selesnyans know that the Orzhov or the Golgari could never claim a Selesnyan soul, because that soul will be uploaded to the World Soul and will be kept there forever. The Golgari and the Orzhov are the enemy colored pair of the triangle. They should be contrasting each other while being weirdly similar, and they are. Both are about the afterlife, but in completely different ways. The Golgari see the afterlife as something ordinary. Undead just belong among the living because both are life. The Orzhov see the unlife as a tool, either for eternal servitude or for their leaders who can use eternity as their weapon. In the art of this split card, we see an Orzhov minion stealing a corpse from the ground. This is mostly a crime because what's in the ground belongs to the Golgari. So they sent their army of insects in to destroy Orzhov artifacts, creatures and spells or enchantments, taking from them what they care about, gold. Like with the Golgari and the Simic, the Orzhov and the Golgari only care about each other when it's too late, which might be a Golgari thing. The Orzhov, for example, only care about pollution when it gets to their churches. The two guilds view death in such a different way that they can't stop fighting. Mostly they're fighting over who gets to use the death, and both factions think their view is the right one. The Orzhov raised the dead to rule, the Golgari raised them to serve. That's what the Orzhov thinks, at least. The Golgari see the difference because they traffic in flesh, not souls, even though apparently the Golgari do see the use for souls to fuel the cycle. The difference is that the Golgari wouldn't force a soul to stay, because it would try to take over bodies, and that's not natural. To them, the Golgari believe that death is the end of one thing and the start of another. The Orzhov never want life to end. The two black guilds fight over who the strongest unlife guild is, and as far as we've seen, the Selesnya and the Golgari came together for the War of the Spark, but otherwise their philosophies are always apart. Wanting to live is very different from accepting to die for whatever reason you accept it. This triangle is more clear because the Selesnyans offer a direct stop to the afterlife of the Golgari and the Orzhov. I want to talk about another shape, the square. When you add the Selesnya, the Azorius, the Golgari and the Dimir to a shape, you get a sort of square. The Selesnyans share white with Azorius, who share blue with Dimir, who share black with Golgari, who share green with Selesnya. Every guild has two touching guilds and one enemy, with the enemy colored guild and its rival making for the largest fight. The Golgari and the Azorius are, like I said, the most obvious enemy we find on Ravnica. The Selesnya and the Dimir also don't touch each other, so let's look at them and compare them to the Azorius and the Golgari. This rivalry is very different from the Azorius and the Golgari, because the Azorius and the Golgari were directly opposed, with no other guilds being as opposed, while the Selesnyans and the Dimir have a different kind of rivalry against each other and will be way more aggressive towards each other directly, even though in this case it might be a little bit more secretive. So the Selesnyans have other rivals in this manner, like the Rakdos, or only the Rakdos, and the Dimir have the Gruul as their other rival directly against them in this manner. The Selesnya and the Dimir have more points of tension. Dimir's black is enemies with the green and the white, and white and black have a tension, and green is enemies with blue and black. The Golgari and the Azorius just had 2 tension points, so the Dimir and the Selesnya should be even fiercer enemies than them. And in this case we do see this war. It's just that the active aggressive guild here is the Dimir instead of the Azorius, so the tension is less obvious. But in this card we see Orzhov directly spreading rumors in Amara's ear, wanting to topple the Selesnya and Conclave's leadership and make sure that they lose the most from the War of the Spark, which they eventually did. And it seems like these two guilds have the most direct references towards trying to kill each other. The Selesnyans outright shoot anyone down who lies or steals. The Dimir outright murder any Selesnyan missionary that dares to come close to a Dimir knife. The two guilds don't care about what they have to do, they just despise each other. The Selesnyans hate how the Dimir attack. Their lies and subtleties go directly against the Selesnyans' openness towards each other. They swat down any insect coming from their forest. And they send huge great worms to be the answer to any little bit of intrigue and subtlety. Something that's greatly annoying to the Dimir, who don't deal in matters of huge 1616 worms. There should be a touch point between the guilds, because Selesnya's white is friends with Dimir's blue, but Selesnya's white is about unity, which the Dimir's black tries to prevent. The Dimir's blue is all about planning, which the Selesnyans hate, because they prefer to look at history over the future. In this manner the two guilds will never become friends. Now with the color touching guilds who are in a triangle of control, they all have a respect for each other. Friendly guilds more so among each other, because they're held together with the enemy guild close to them. The Selesnya and the Azorius formed a triangle together with the Simic, while the Selesnya and Azorius used different methods and didn't agree on this point. They still wanted the same thing. The Azorius and the Dimir form a triangle together with the Orzhov. So let's look at the Azorius and the Dimir now. The thing is that both guilds don't want you to know that they want this thing, but both guilds want a very blue treasure: information, secrets, and because of those things, they want control. The thing is that the Azorius like to keep secrets. They want to stop those secrets from creating chaos and the weakness in their system. The Dimir want to steal secrets because it helps them destroy the system. In this case, the method is the same, but the goal is massively different. The Azorius' most important creature type is the Sphinx. It is a beast of secrets and riddles above all, and thrives in the massive structures of the Azorius, but the Dimir deal with them too. The Dimir are sometimes smart enough to solve a Sphinx's riddle, and they definitely have the motivation to have a look into the mind of a Sphinx. So the Dimir steal secrets from the Azorius, and they keep the Azorius from knowing more about the Dimir. These two guilds should be rather friendly, but their difference in goals just pits them against each other. The two do respect each other. They steal secrets from each other, and the Azorius would arrest any Dimir agent when they found them. They create networks of agents and let them fight it out in the shadows. But the Azorius need a very strong and proactive leader if they want to be a bane to the Dimir. And that's exactly why they need the Orzhov in their triangle. Without help, the Azorius keep looking for Dimir agents who are just a little too good at hiding from them. Perhaps they do work together, sharing secrets, and the Azorius just don't really feel the need to truly get rid of the Dimir. Because Azor, the Azorius Perun, has claimed that even the Dimir have their purpose. It's a counterweight to many other guilds like the Selesnya, and where the Azorius can't directly attack the Conclave because they haven't done anything against the law, the Dimir can keep the peaceful guild small enough. I wouldn't put it past the Azorius to know of the Dimir purpose, making the Azorius not want to deal too much with the Shadow Guild. The Azorius even help them because talk about the Dimir would create fear in their people. The Azorius help keep the Dimir a secret so that the Ravnicans don't have too many nightmares about the Dimir sigil. And with that fact we see the use of the square. The Azorius keep the Golgari down, helping the Dimir and the Selesnyans who don't deal with the swarm. The Dimir and the Selesnyans are a counter to each other too, offering help to the Golgari and the Azorius in turn. Let's look at a new kind of relationship between guilds. When two enemy-colored guilds are next to each other on the color wheel, they don't share a single color. They should be miles away from each other. The Golgari are all about nature and decay, and the Izzet are all about making a legacy and creating contraptions and machines. Something that's annoying to the Golgari because machines don't decay as fast. But the two guilds share something unexpected. They share a relative friendship with the Rakdos. Both guilds form a friendly triangle with the Chaos Guild, but for different reasons. Meanwhile, the two guilds seem at first at odds in reality. The Golgari see the Izzet drive to expand and exploit the resources of Ravnica. They understand this part, but they don't understand why the Izzet would want to make those weird contractions. And when the Izzet try to get resources from the Undercity, they find it to be very inhospitable. Why do the Golgari care about dying so much when there's so much work to work towards? But here's the crux. Both guilds are in their own ways like the Rakdos. They both don't care about dying at all. The Izzet are not too concerned with their egos and would put their experimentation above their lives. The Golgari know that death is just natural and just a part of life. And both guilds are obsessed enough to let death be a part of their lives. The Izzet are obsessed with their experiments, and the Golgari are obsessed by death itself. And to understand this new triangle a little bit better, let's look at one of the more friendly guilds in this triangle. The Rakdos and the Izzet like each other, which is weird for the Rakdos. But the guilds see a form of recklessness in each other and appreciate the weirdness that comes out of it. Note that aside from this sort of friendly triangle, the Izzet and the Rakdos also share a triangle with the Dimir, and here the Izzet should be controlling about the Rakdos. But they do appreciate parts of each other. The guilds even recruit from each other. A famous trio of fairies who died returned as zombies to the Rakdos clan. Apparently the Izzet found them to be too insatiable, and the Rakdos accepted them even more for it. There is a difference between the guilds, because the Izzet are crazy in the name of progress, and the Rakdos don't even like names. They use their stage names. Progress and pleasure are distinctly different. The two guilds even have a similar leadership structure, where one very strong being is very clearly calling the shots. But the Izzet follow Mizzet's intellect, and the Rakdos love how free Rakdos lets the Rakdos be. Oh, and their leaders also put their names down as their guild names. Don't know what that says. The two guys don't trust each other one bit, by the way. Rakdos often lets Hekara spy on the dragon nowadays. but I feel like both leaders are respectful towards each other as well, because they do see each other's power and because they feel both like their minions are definitely not very impressive. I'd love to see their tea party. The Golgari and Rakdos seem very far removed from each other in some ways, but the Golgari also share a triangle together with the Gruul, where the Golgari are trying to control the Gruul and the Rakdos. They also do have some very clear touch points with the Rakdos. Their main difference is that the Golgari are very serious about what they do and the Rakdos are not. But both guilds are all about life, actually, and they even both feel like death doesn't have to be the end. While both revel in death, they have clear differences. Judith from the Rakdos notes that Vraska from the Golgari sees how important death is, but the Golgari just don't seem to get the joke. Meanwhile, I imagine the Golgari view the Rakdos as people that really don't understand why death is so important to the cycle. But both guilds appreciate each other's murdering many people. The Golgari appreciate the mulch and the Rakdos appreciate the spectacle. Their bond even resulted in a piece of the bond cycle. We saw the Simic and the Selesnya in their cycle, and the Boros and the Gruul in theirs. The Golgari and the Rakdos share the vision that death is just a veil. They still didn't agree on why death is important, but they do know it just is. And this is another touch point. Both guilds accept what is. The Rakdos don't care about what is and therefore just accept whatever they sense and feel. The Golgari are a very rooted guild that accept what is, because only the earth and its dirt matter to them. They have a clear view of reality and don't care about the future of Ravnica too much outside of their scheming. And in this way we find this triangle of guilds, where the Golgari and Izzet seem furthest removed, but they find a few strong touch points, because of the alchemy between black and red, and in their case the simple disregard for the self. Either because the swarm is more important, because your experiments are more important, or because the moment you are in is more important than your mortal body. Weird for two black aligned guilds not to care about the self. The Gruul might feel like an unlovable clan, but with the Rakdos, the clan with the most enemies, the Gruul find a weird friendship. The two guilds share their red favor for the will of the self, but they more so share a respect for power. Together they could make the best parties, so Rakdos is in it too. Because of the momentary overdose of structure on Ravnica, the two have found a friendship in trying to overthrow the foundations of the city. There are some differences. Rakdos as a leader prefers to keep the power to himself, while the Gruul would let anyone fight their leader for power. Still, the two see each other as a kind of friends. The Rakdos would say the Gruul are stupid for using their lives for raw fighting, while they could have more fun. But they do see their strength and therefore agree with the effects of what Gruul does. These two factions have become friends because of their effect on the city, while they disagree with their philosophies almost completely. Because the Rakdos would do what's fun and the Gruul do what they should according to their nature. But they still do the same. They fight for anarchy and chaos. They're perfect in sieges together, where the Rakdos sow chaos and the Gruul break through walls and fortifications. They love to raid together too. When they're together they will break things. And yes, they have fought before out of the sheer joy of fighting, but in essence they're on the same side. When we look at the giants and ogres of the two guilds, we see a difference. You wouldn't say ogres are the most altruistic bunch, but with the Gruul they do have a goal: to protect the wilderness, even if it is still through smashing stuff. The Rakdos giants just smash stuff because they like the special effects of it. Looking further at the triangle with the Golgari, the Rakdos shared with the Golgari a disregard for death. The Gruul side with life, preferring it, because at least to them, you can't fight when you're dead. Let's look at the Golgari and the Gruul to close this one off. With the Gruul and the Golgari we finished the anti-society triangle with the Rakdos. These last two guilds share a fierce love for nature. I would say the fiercest of all guilds, but when they look at a body, the Golgari see flesh. your physical body that slowly decays only to feed a new body. You exile a creature to put its power into another creature. The Gruul see your blood, as long as it rages, you're worth something. In this case, dealing damage to another creature or player, while you're alive, mind you. A Gruul shaman famously said that there's wisdom in Golgari words. They understand nature's urge to tear down structures and reduce them to earth, but their hearts have been deadened. They have no passion for life. Still, the Gruul share the love for the earth and death. They have a rite of passing where you're put in the earth for some time, allowing you to experience being close to death, almost like the Golgari, you'd say. But the Gruul do this because they feel that only by touching death do you appreciate life. Both guilds together with the Rakdos are what's constantly gnawing at civilization. I think you could give every friendly triangle a theme. Boros, Selesnya and the Gruul were about cooperation and community. The Azorius, Simic and Selesnya are about structure and order, and the further you get from these triangles, the farther removed you get. Hence the hate between the Azorius and the Golgari, or the Selesnya and the Dimir. You might have already forgotten that one. I'm probably just way too deep into this, just like the Golgari and the Gruul. We now get to look at another pair of guilds that should be furthest removed from each other, but should have a slight touch point. The Golgari and the Boros don't share a color and should hate each other, but they share a respect for the Gruul. The thing is, I don't have a single piece of evidence for the guilds liking each other here. In fact, most of them show things like this, where the Boros are a piece of mulch to the Golgari. Other cards include a Boros warrior blasting someone to pieces with a flaming sword. Fresca duly notes that the boom resulting from this clash is what passes for subtlety among the Boros. The Boros are out in the open and love the sunlight. They have extra open streets to let in the sunlight and to foster openness in their soldiers. They should be honest towards their comrades and should feel unity towards each other. The Golgari hide in tunnels where preferably no light shines. They only come up for sunlight when they have to do so for certain kinds of shrooms or when they want to attack Boros soldiers. But honestly, isn't that exactly what the Gruul would have wanted? That their close friends would fight to the death? For their convictions, just like the Gruul, and here's the point, the Golgari don't even like to fight. But I think the fierceness of the two guilds out of conviction is what binds them. The Gruul fight for nature and freedom, the Boros fight hard for their legion and comrades, and the Golgari fight for their rights, and they all fight for their convictions. The official statements between the Golgari and the Boros are these. The Boros say that the Golgari are an unfortunate guild that serves a necessary function for the good of all. They appreciate their purpose, but dislike their state. The Golgari say they don't understand Boros language. Their militant dedication to slogans disturbs them, but they don't hate the Boros per se. They just don't understand their reasons. They do understand the fact that they have reasons, and in fact they might respect them in this new light or darkness. The Azorius and the Boros should feel a respect to each other, a rivalry and at the same time a certain distance. Just like we saw with the Dimir and the Golgari or Simic. But in this case, the two guilds are way more open about their daily business. So comparing this triangle of the Azorius, Boros and Izzet should be interesting. Just looking at the Boros nav squads, we seem to just find two guilds in an alliance. The Azorius pay for the Boros to keep maps of the Undercity actual. The Boros don't care about getting their feet wet and their hands dirty. And the Azorius need an eye in the Undercity. But the Azorius also might be hiring the Boros to set them up against the Golgari and mostly against the Dimir, because spying on the Golgari is foolish and spying on the Dimir is impossible, except for the light-bearing Boros. The Azorius on their turn know that the Boros should be the counterbalance to the Dimir. In this way we find the Azorius an ally when we're looking for guild relations. The Boros certainly don't just find allies among the Azorius. They do compete in aerial contests against the Boros, and often they're trying to recruit the same soldiers and acrobats. The two guilds of order are also both striving to be the best Sky Legion. The Azorius don't always agree with the Boros. The Legion is probably a useful tool in some cases, but their convictions are often opposed to the law. Aurelia even says that having conviction is more important than being righteous. To the Boros, as long as you feel you're right enough to act. The Azorius would never act before knowing perfectly well that they're absolutely right in their eyes. And the Boros took that personally. They even built prisons in the sky just to circumvent Azorius rules, because if they need to punish someone, the Boros just will, even if it's just not at all. The two guilds also have a split card from Murders at Karlov. Here, the Boros card shows us a bunch of people standing around a murder. They're getting fussy and will go over into action. Soldiers are trying to keep order, but the red in the art makes us think that action will soon follow. On the Azorius side, we see Thopters patrolling. They are probably looking for the killer first, and the Vedalken man is reading from a humongous scroll, reading the law first before taking any action. The icy blue adds to this feeling, and that's exactly the point of tension for these guilds. Icy blue against fiery red. Both uphold order, but one through action and the other through thought. In this triangle we saw a conflict between white and blue previously. What if the guild has blue and red? The Izzet still have a need to do whatever they want, but this time instead of looking for order, the Izzet are looking for progress. This is something the Azorius look for too, but in their case they like to do it step by step. The Izzet don't mind skipping a few. One of the Izzet's normal hobbies is creating weirds. They like to put elementals together that shouldn't match at all, because doing so has really cool effects. The Azorius don't care for cool effects that blow up neighborhoods, but the Izzet can't seem to find out whether a weird is a fire elemental or a water elemental when it's both. So they'll never be able to put down on paper what exactly is forbidden to create. See, the Izzet do write down everything about the experiments they perform, but they should think about everything that could happen before they try it, at least according to the Azorius. To the Izzet, this is a very slow approach. Aside from ideas and experiments, the Izzet also care for most infrastructure on Ravnica. This is why the Azorius know that the Izzet are necessary. Plus, without the Izzet's drive to improve, guilds like the Selesnyans would eventually halt all progress together. The Azorius prefer for the Izzet to continue experimenting, while the Azorius law mages try to slow down progress at least a little. Let the Izzet think and act outside the box, because the Azorius would never do this. The Izzet break laws, but towards a goal. The Azorius agree with the goal, but just not with the process. So yes, still a rivalry, but one at least the Azorius are okay with to have. The Izzet, not so much. The Izzet would prefer the Azorius to think about a few rules that protect freedom too. To finish the triangle we have the Izzet and Boros. With the Golgari and Simic we saw a singular purpose, but also an all-out war for the means to that end. With the Izzet we find two guilds that are all about doing what you want. The red color in both guilds is really strong, but the Boros prefer a focus on their legion friends, where the Izzet are individual and focus on technology and improvement. Together they stand against the Azorius who try to halt action, as two guilds that definitely try to further it. The thing is that the Boros and the Izzet do often work together. The Boros have a whole division that is designed to work with the Izzet to create stronger magically enhanced soldiers and weapons. Tajik leads this cause, hence his ability to prevent all non-combat damage. Thing is that the Izzet don't like to be controlled in this manner. The Boros use Izzet's weapons even when they're used against the Izzet. The manner in which the Boros use Izzet experiments must be appalling to them. The Izzet love firebolts, so they designed conductors for the Boros. The Boros have tamed the elemental soldiers to wear armor that gives form to these elementals. To the Izzet this would feel like limiting creativity. To the Boros this is putting function to the form. While the two guilds do work together in order to create the ultimate soldier, Aurelia has denounced Niv Mizzet and the Boros have denounced the Izzet multiple times. While they make beautiful things, there is a war between chaos and order going on here. The Izzet can't help but create things that explode. These are illegal things that the Boros love to help destroy, but the Boros destroy them because they're illegal, while the Izzet would want them to be destroyed in the process of experimentation, for a cause that's different than just smashing the bad guys. Odds and ends are various things of different types, all small and unimportant. Either they're a bit strange or they're the last thing to be done with. The Izzet are weird here and the Boros are cleaning up every bit of scum from the ends of the earth if they have to. The difference with these two is in the seriosity. The Izzet try anything they want and learn from it after, flipping a coin to see if you'll counter or copy the spell, stopping what's happening like a blue card or amplifying it like a red one. Boros is very serious about what they're doing. They want a lot, mostly smashing things, and they're being directed to smash the right things by their commanders. They'll say, "I will smash 2 of your things," while not really knowing what they'll smash. They just know that whatever they smash, it's a good thing to smash. Thinking about the triangle, we see guilds standing against the Azorius in very different ways. Both the Izzet and the Boros have a strong sense of structure in their guild, either through conformity or through a search for steady improvement by Niv-Mizzet. But the Azorius expect more structure and actively fight against the red parts of these guilds. The Izzet and Boros can find each other on that notion, that they want to do what they want to do. But their leadership styles differ too much. The Boros confirm ahead of time and follow a shared sense of justice. Their conviction is their red part. The Izzet apply structure afterwards, where they discard ideas that didn't work or write down any effect from an experiment. Their actions are often criminal and they stop at nothing to find progress, and their missions often go against the law of Ravnica. The Boros have to stop the Izzet often. So again we find 2 enemy-colored guilds in a conflict and the attaching friendly guild keeps them at bay, or the other way around. In this case, the Azorius are controlling them to do what they must, but not too much. The Simic and the Gruul have a very interesting relationship. They're both about nature, they both look at what's inside life and try to get it out, but the Simic do it through science, by forcing nature to bend to Simic's will. The Gruul meanwhile think nature will burst out of the seams of society by itself. These guilds have the same focus point from a completely opposite point of view. Together they are in the controlling triangle together with the Izzet again. What the 2 guilds against the Gruul do is thinking about the future instead of the right now, what do I want to do, I want to destroy things. They think about the future. The Simic in this case think about the future of nature. I mean, look at these 2 beasts. Both look down on humanity in exactly the same way, but they've been grown into their natural states in completely different ways. The savage-born Hydra was always like this. It was born to be savage. It just needed time to grow in the wilds. The Krasis Hydra was combined with the jellyfish to ultimately look really silly, but it's still a menace to society. This is why the Simic would love to accept the Gruul to their ranks, even though the Gruul serve as a reminder of what not to become. Remember the Gore clan who've been living close to society in order to wreck it properly? Remember them? Well, they've met the Simic, apparently, and they found a guild of people who embrace the beauty of nature, but they just do it so slowly from their perspective. If you just let the beasts of the sea free, wouldn't they already wreck Ravnica stones for you? Why experiment on creatures and wait until you have the perfect one? These are good enough. But there is at least one example of a Gruul shaman jumping ship to join the depths. Forel was Gruul once, which is why he notes throwing rocks was his previous pastime. Now he's become all of this fishy magnificence and he views the Gruul as sad, unfulfilled lives just playing in the dirt. The Azorius versus the Rakdos is perhaps one of the most insolvable relationships possible. It is most iconic and it's the last pair of guilds to work together, even if it's by accident. The Azorius stand for order and structure and the Rakdos revel in chaos. Any Rakdos wish will need some backlash from the Azorius. The only reason why these two guilds just don't kill each other in an all-out war is because the Azorius don't have the power to round the Rakdos up, and they know that people do need an outlet. And the Rakdos have more fun things to do than go up against Azorius and their flying protected castles. The Azorius know that they shouldn't just remove the Rakdos, but they also wish that society at large will someday grow out of the childish need for hedonism. They feel like Rakdos souls are beyond help, but also just don't understand them at all. To the Azorius, the Rakdos are like a fever dream that they just can't directly look at for too long. The Azorius gain power from whatever they can control, but when a guild is so chaotic, the Azorius lose their power over them. They need to be able to work with at least some sense of structure or humanity, and the Rakdos really have none of it. In reverse, it's much simpler. The Rakdos feel like there is just one way to make an Azorius dance and enjoy life, and that's by turning them into right puppets. Fun thing is that the Rakdos feel like they're doing the poor Azorius a favor by removing their metaphysical stick up their you know what, and by adding a real physical version to it. A true summary of the relationship between the two guilds are their drakes. The Rakdos love Drake because of how much havoc he can cause. They can cause. It's why they honor them and want them to be set free. The Azorius put masks on drakes to control them and have them patrol the skies for even more control over it. It's the exact opposite manner of looking at will. One is the will of discipline and the other is the will of wanting. Where on the color wheel the Boros and the Dimir don't seem that far apart, they have 4 rivaling colors, because white is next to blue and black is next to red, and in reality these two do not have any connection at all. This is an exact opposite like we found with the Selesnya and Izzet guilds. And now the Dimir are like the moon that likes to keep its strength hidden, while the Boros is like the sun, as they love to fight in the open and prefer to show their strength. They are exact opposites, and what we often see with these kinds of guilds is that they stay away, but also try to damage each other as much as possible. This is exactly why the two guilds don't view the other side as a threat. The Boros are too predictable for the calculating Dimir, and the Dimir just seem too weak. Both parties do strive for power over each other, but the Dimir keep that power to themselves, while the Boros like to share their power with the world actively. This controlling versus driving power is a constant motor of conflict that also helps keep both guilds in check. The Dimir will have to stay in the shadows while the Boros get weakened from the Dimir operations. The Dimir have always had an easy time of controlling the Boros. They just had to get their simple minds for a little bit and could easily then stun them to get past. More often than not, the monotonous manner in which soldiers are trained made them easy prey to the Dimir. They could even have traps in place that would work on people with the exact description of a Boros soldier, and their traps would work every single time against them. But through being dim-witted and stubborn and predictable, the Boros also protect themselves. Just stay vigilant and protect all entrances at all times without blinking, and the Dimir won't be able to pass their superior physical strength. That's where the Boros will always win out. The Boros, on the other hand, can burn out the Dimir agents out of their holes. Subtlety was never for the Boros, and they really don't need it. Fire magic is enough to illuminate the shadows around the Dimir agents, so why bother about them? Problem is that burning an agent to ashes does nothing to the Dimir itself. They can only be hit once you can interrogate their agents well enough, and the Boros honestly never get to that point. In this way, the Boros can help the Dimir, because the Dimir can point them to one of their targets, and the Boros will very reliably show up to cause a ruckus. The Boros do have a dedicated house that's tasked with snuffing out Dimir hideouts, and they often are rather effective, but mostly because they use large-scale search parties to find the hideouts. Meanwhile, the Dimir only help the Boros when they absolutely have to. But I would say that a partnership between the two guilds would be perfect. The Dimir for the information and the Boros for the brawn. that would be an unstoppable FBI team. The Orzhov and the Boros are very much alike in many ways, mostly in that they both achieve what they want through a very strict sense of order, law, and societal structure. But the Boros just follow their hearts, where the Orzhov just follow the scent of gold hard coin. The two guilds are in a triangle together with the Rakdos, where the two guilds are more about controlling the Rakdos through their wanting anything with the Boros, and the Orzhov can put a halt to them by being almost just as evil as the other guild, but in a more controlling sense of it. The Boros are aggressive to anyone that steps outside of their sense of justice, but the Orzhov don't even seem to have a sense of justice. In the eyes of the Boros, what they do is just senseless murder of whoever is weak. The Boros would rather fight a fighting opponent. But the Boros leadership does also know that the syndicate is not easily moved to action in their sense. They only move slowly towards their goals, methodically, but not very quickly. The perfect creature type to illustrate the difference between these guilds is the Angel. Often they start with the Boros as they've descended from their first guildmaster. They're righteous and often turn into candidates for the guildmaster position. They're fiery and know what to do. But once an Angel becomes dissatisfied with the Boros' way of working for too long, basically saying that they don't get to fight enough, they turn bitter and might be lured in by the Orzhov, who promise them respect, status and power. The Angels in turn give the Orzhov power back, because the Angels are a sign of power and emanate an aura of strength, and they demand respect from their followers. They're also a perfect religious item to have for powerful Orzhova to display. So basically a perfect fit, which does turn out to make the Angels even more bitter and even more dangerous. To the Orzhov, the sense of justice from the Legion is just very annoying. Why can't it be bought out? It seems like whenever they subjugate people for having debts to them, the Boros keep jumping in to save their souls. Those were of Orzhov possession, and the Boros really had no right to damage their goods. One way to look at the difference between the guilds is what they would do to stolen goods. The Boros would put those goods away behind bars. Let's see anyone come and take it. Really, try to take it, the Boros love a good fight. Well, the Orzhov would find any item confiscated to them and would take it for themselves. They'd use as many lives to throw at Boros walls as they needed, even if that item would be destroyed in the process. The Orzhov will not be stolen from. But usually an uneasy staring contest ensues between the Boros and the Orzhov, because they do respect each other at least somewhat for having control over their guilds. But if for any reason the Boros or the Orzhov would be attacked by the other guild, there's no reason not to let a counterattack happen. Thing is that they really don't want to destroy each other because they know they need their structure, their order to keep a check on guilds like the Rakdos. The Selesnya conclave values life. The Rakdos cult values living. So while they're looking at the same thing, their philosophies about that thing is opposite. So they will never be friends with the Rakdos. But we can see a glaring difference from the Simic versus Rakdos and the Selesnyans versus Rakdos. The Simic on the color wheel were directly opposed. They valued life itself, but also were looking at the future, which opposed them against the Rakdos. The Selesnyans do value life as it is now, so they're relatively close to the Rakdos in this way. Still, their white side of order, peace and balance cannot be tolerated by the Rakdos. The Rakdos in turn know that the Selesnyans are more Rakdos than they admit. Their leaders could be bought before and they brainwash their people themselves. Rakdos in this sense has better leadership because he lets their people do what they want, instead of forcing them to follow the world soul. The Selesnyans shouldn't hate, it's against their nature, but they do say that the Rakdos should be contained. For now, for a Selesnyan, this feels like helping the Rakdos, but to them it does feel like hatred. The spell Tower Defense embodies Selesnya's attitude towards the Rakdos. Defensive, not aggressive. They prepare for attacks knowing that one day they might have to defend their world from something far greater than simple raiders. The drakes are practice. We may one day need to bring down a sky swallower, or maybe even Rakdos himself. The Conclave understands that the Rakdos are not merely an inconvenience, they are an existential threat. Interestingly, while the Rakdos favor open hatred and actively want to destroy the Conclave and all it stands for, they're more subtle in their attacks. They like to bring out the bloodlust in the Selesnyans, because inside they're still just wild beasts. They've become pampered and play at selflessness, but really they've the most anger held up of any guild. And nothing puts a Rakdos performer in a killing mood like a liar wearing a saint's mask. Rakdos thrives on chaos, and nothing creates more chaos than turning a devoted Selesnyan against their own cause. The Conclave is against the unnatural and finds necromancy among those, but I think they've had enough cause to change in recent years. During the war, for example, many Selesnyan warriors accepted being resurrected to fight for their world. And the Rakdos often got over their hatred because there was a fight to finish. The conflict between Selesnya and Rakdos is eternal. The Conclave will never accept the cult's chaos, and the guild will never tolerate the Conclave's hypocrisy. The Conclave defends, the cult destroys, but no matter how many times the battle plays out, neither side will ever truly claim victory. Because hatred, after all, is a natural part of life. The Selesnyans have the Izzet against them directly opposed in the color wheel. Red and green touch and white and blue touch, but both guilds aren't controlling like the Azorius or as plainly wild as the Gruul. The Izzet are about innovation, and the Selesnyans are about history and shaping the world to its natural form. Izzet delved into the depths of Ravnica's past, and Selesnya followed without fear. When the Izzet turned their sights on the implicit maze, unearthing secrets buried beneath the city, the Selesnyans were right behind them, not because they sought the same knowledge, but because Ravnica itself is sacred to them. If the Izzet dared to pry open the past, then the Conclave would be there to protect it or reclaim it. The underworld of Ravnica, once forgotten, now became a battlefield of science versus faith, of arcane discovery against spiritual reverence. The Izzet ventured in with reckless wonder. The Selesnyans followed, shielded by their magic, undeterred by the dangers below. We will defend the world soul from Izzet progress at any cost. To the Selesnya, Izzet magic is a disease. Every spark of experimentation, every spell hastily cast, every moment of unchecked curiosity is another wound to the soul of Ravnica. Dryad militants, warriors, bound to the very essence of nature, will not allow such poisons to take root. That is why they exile instants and sorceries, refusing to let Izzet magic cycle back into the world. What the Izzet create, the Selesnyans erase. Progress is fleeting, nature is eternal. We will grow an army large enough to withstand the Izzet's madness. Selesnya's peaceful exterior fools many. They speak of unity, of balance, of harmony between all things. But harmony, when threatened, must be defended, so they populate, they grow. For every arcane experiment gone wrong, they summon 2 more warriors to push back the chaos. Where the Izzet believe in discovery through destruction, the Selesnya believe in preservation through overwhelming force. Even among their own ranks, some druids hesitate. They did not expect the Conclave to march to war, but Trostani knows better. There is no such thing as peace when the Izzet are left unchecked. If you ask me, those root lovers value mindless dogma over progress. The Izzet in the eyes of the Conclave break apart reality just to see how it ticks. They construct marvels of metal and magic that work against the natural world, and so the Selesnyans work against their constructs to grind them to dust and dismantle them. Just so nature has more room to grow. Creation to the Selesnyans is a gift. To the Izzet, creation is a playground, and that goes against the Selesnyan vision. Things shouldn't be created because you want them to be created. They should be gifts from the world soul, and you should wait for them forever. While Lazov from the Dimir schemed and Niv-Mizzet researched, Trostani sought the future in the whispers of the past. A sorcery that would shuffle 3 cards from your graveyard and remembrance into your library. Returning to the past is the Selesnyans' way of answering, scheming and research. They just turn a blind eye to it. When others look forward, the Selesnyans look to the past. The world does not need change. To them, it just needs to heal. Where the Izzet elementals have been mistakes that escaped and created weird life forms by combining elementals into new life forms that shouldn't at first be able to exist and now create new opportunities for the world to build upon. The Selesnyans have been slowly but carefully cultivating their elementals as integral parts of the world they believe in. Both kinds of elementals trample over society as if it wasn't meant to be there, but the Izzet ones started off a bit more fiery and end up being tamed in the end. Because even the weirds have been tamed by society. The Izzet work towards their mistakes becoming assets to the Ravnica as a city, while Selesnyan elementals are still trampling down markets and small buildings. Izzet, again, is about progress, while Selesnya keeps things as is. The Izzet and the Selesnyans clash often. The Izzet strive for innovation with curiosity. They're the fire to the Selesnyans' force, so the Conclave pushes back to defend the world order as they see it. But the two guilds also work together in some cases. Once nature and magic are needed, the two guilds need to work together, and that's closer to the truth. Because like with the Rakdos, the Izzet have one leader, but that still brings them a form of unity, even if it helps them work towards the wrong goal to the Selesnyans' eyes. And the Izzet appreciate Selesnyans' ability to plan for their work, even if it's just about planting trees in an ordered manner. At least they are passionate about something. The Rakdos and Simic I have mentioned a few times now. Weird thing is, they're not often mentioned on the same cards. And that's often because the guilds are that opposed, just like we saw with the Selesnyans and the Izzet just now. It's because the Rakdos don't like water in this case, and most Simic are isolationists, so they don't really see each other much physically. The same goes for most enemy guilds. They're just not fighting on the same levels. The Azorius often attack the Golgari accidentally, and the Orzhov are very aware of the Gruul removing their building projects. But mostly they're not in an all-out war, which they should be. And the Simic do say it. I quote, "We must strive not to understand them, but to understand why they are allowed to persist. What needs do they fulfill for the citizenry? In the meantime, treat them as rabid animals. Keep your distance." And this is something from the Simic because they always work with rabid animals. Still, the Rakdos and the Simic fight each other, because the Simic are about looking towards the future and the Rakdos are about living in the present. The Simic are about life and the Rakdos don't care about death. Just the process of dying because that should be fun. Or about returning from the death for one last party. The best way to describe the relation between such enemy guilds is by looking at their closest colors. Green and red should be close to each other, but where red for the Rakdos means freedom for the self, green for the Simic is a nature that should be perfected and learned from at most. Looked at for reference. And blue-black are allied, but blue isn't about planning for the self, it's about turning life into something extra tomorrow. And black to the Rakdos isn't ruthless planning and reason, it's about doing what you want and perhaps thinking one or two steps ahead, just like I did just now and made a mistake because of it, but that's okay to the Rakdos. Look now at the Simic Drakes. The Rakdos would love to have this thing around to have fun with, have it rip open society and their people. But the Simic saw previous transgressions like that as a mistake. They're careful to show their most monsters, because it could mean attack from the outside, which would halt their progress. So now they learn to still improve on their previous creations, but they do it more carefully, not just letting life run rampant, but controlling it. Then the Drake that results from their experiments can be let go and it will wreak havoc, but more so because they needed more space in their labs so that they can start working on the next crisis. not because they wanted to enjoy the results of this next monster. The Boros see strength in the Simic's connection to nature, and the Simic respect the Boros' discipline and structure. Even without color alignment, there's a sliver of mutual admiration, just enough to make their conflict frustrating rather than outright hostile. The Boros see Simic experimentation as reckless, a waste of magic that could be put to better use. The Simic, in turn, think of the Boros as dangerous, blunt instruments of order that prefer breaking things over understanding them. Neither guild wants much to do with the other, but when they do cross paths, the arguments tend to be loud. The two guilds form a friendly triangle with the Selesnya Guild, because here I think the three guilds in a vacuum would be a great combination where there would be peace because the Selesnyans and the Boros will make sure of that. And there will be enough space for the Simic to do all of their experiments, be free to create a perfect society, and the Selesnyans will often help them to do exactly just that, create that perfect society, while the Boros are there to keep the peace, perhaps a tad forcefully, where the Selesnyans there can have their peace on their own guild, because the Boros will do the fighting for them. So the three of them really would be a great pair, or trio, but there's just too many other guilds in the city that don't want that sort of perfect society to be. Boros griffins have long ruled the skies, and the Simic refuse to accept it. Every few years some ambitious biomancer tries to craft a Krasis that can rival a griffin in speed and power. And every few years the Boros watch with amusement as the experiments fall short. The Boros know their griffins are loyal, disciplined mounts. Why tamper with perfection? The Simic, on the other hand, see griffins as rigid, incapable of growth, and a Krasis might fail at first, but it can adapt. In their minds, that makes it superior. Neither side will ever concede the argument. Not every Boros soldier sees the Simic's creations as abominations, but plenty do. To them, a Pegasus is a pure, noble creature, while a Krasis is a mockery of nature. The Simic see this as nothing but more than a prejudice, a refusal to acknowledge the beauty in change. The Boros don't particularly care for that explanation, because they don't want change. They will use Simic creations in battle if they have to, but they won't like it. Boros soldiers have never understood the Simic's need to create. If you already have a fish with two eyes, why make one with only one? The Simic response is simple: why not? The Boros don't find that answer particularly compelling. Where the Simic create, the Boros destroy. Not out of malice, but out of necessity, or so they claim. The Boros see no reason to let something exist if it serves no purpose, or perps no service. The Simic find that reasoning laughable. What purpose did a griffin serve before the Boros tamed it? What value does the Pegasus have beyond what people assign to it? To the Simic, progress is just its own justification. To the Boros, if something isn't right, it isn't needed, and that's why the two will never truly understand each other. The Gruul have little love for any of Ravnica's so-called civilized guilds, but their disdain for the Orzhov runs especially deep. They're like the Izzet and Selesnya of green, red, black and white. The Orzhov demand order, structure and obedience, all things that the Gruul reject on instinct. While black and red can sometimes find common ground in their focus on individual will, the Orzhov have no interest in personal freedom. Their rigid hierarchies and relentless greed make them everything the Gruul despise. For their part, the Orzhov view the Gruul as a living example of what happens when a society lacks leadership. They see the Gruul as a chaotic, leaderless rebel, unfit to be a real faction. The Gruul in turn see the Orzhov as greedy, scheming cowards who hide behind bureaucracy and ghosts instead of facing the world head on. In the city, the conflict is unavoidable. The Gruul who remain in Ravnica streets live in poverty and refuse to be swindled by spectral aristocrats, so they destroy the buildings that the Orzhov built. And really the Orzhov don't care, they will just keep building them and even make some money from building those buildings, so really there's no conflict at all, even if the Gruul think there is. The Orzhov in turn have no patience for these unpredictable, destructive clans, dismissing them as wild animals incapable of keeping a deal and therefore not even worth looking at. Borborygmos especially is everything the Orzhov hate. A leader who rules not by decree but by sheer presence. His commands are simple: fight, eat, survive. No contracts, no debts, no rules. To the Orzhov, he is the proof of the Gruul's failure as a society. To the Gruul, he is proof they don't need one, just the orders. Again, the only orders they need are crush them and we eat. Those are enough. According to Tesa Karlov and according to the game of Magic the Gathering and its cards that have been printed. Even the Orzhov clergy won't risk getting in the way of a Gruul beast. That's what thralls are for. Sending a mindless servant to deliver a message or to be crushed underfoot is just good business and it's entertaining. It keeps the Gruul satisfied and the thralls scared to do something wrong. It's even just fun to experience. See, even the Gruul and the Orzhov can sometimes have fun together, even if it's just to keep the Gruul from destroying more parts of the city. To the Orzhov, the Gruul are filthy scavengers, embracing all that slithers through the cracks of the city. To the Gruul, the Orzhov are parasites feeding off the living. And in a fight between a parasite and a predator, the predator always wins, right? But really both are blights in their eyes, which should be removed, but the Orzhov build too quickly and the Gruul are too strong. Or they're weak and will be defended by other guilds. In that case we're talking about the marginalized that are welcome to the Gruul guild still, but will be protected. The Gruul settle things with blood, not words. The Orzhov can clutch their coin purses all they like, but once the fight starts, wealth means nothing. That's the second part about why the guilds don't just destroy each other. They're ineffective. The Gruul can kill millions of thralls and never get anywhere, and the Orzhov can't even buy a Gruul warrior for longer than a second before they change their minds. The Orzhov churches with their golden facades and marble pillars are an open invitation for destruction. What better way to make a statement than by tearing down the symbols of greed with your own hands? Young Gruul warriors need to make a name for themselves, and destroying a church is often enough to do so. Giants are a rare point of similarity between the two guilds, but only in function, not philosophy. The Orzhov view their giants as mere muscle, tools to be used for extortion and intimidation. The Gruul also value their giants for their strength, but they would never put shackles on them. A Gruul giant fights because it chooses to. An Orzhov giant fights because it must. A Gruul giant has one purpose: destruction. Not for profit, not for power, just to reclaim what was taken. You take our wilds, we take your city. Simple as that. An Orzhov giant is not free. It enforces debts, collects payments, and ensures that those who owe the syndicate never forget it. No one calls it by name, they just call it what it is to them: heavy. Together with the Orzhov, the Rakdos and Boros form a controlling triangle, where the Orzhov control the Rakdos and can be a rare danger to the Boros. The Rakdos and the Boros meanwhile are one of the few guilds that keep each other in check physically. The Boros for order and the Rakdos for chaos. The Boros actively try to exterminate the Rakdos, and the Rakdos love shooting down angels. Even during Gatecrash, the Boros kept fighting the Rakdos. They appreciated the fight the Gateless brought because they had morals, but the Rakdos don't have any of that. Here we see how the Boros are just as red as Rakdos. Even though ignoring the Rakdos for a bit might be better, they still keep fighting them while the insides of their guild are in danger and they are being attacked by all of Ravnica. Meanwhile, the Rakdos were tired of their weapons getting confiscated and created a new kind of magic, See, the Rakdos can be about progress. Where now knives, spears and drills would be put in your body for you to get out when you needed a fight. Just so that the Boros wouldn't be able to find it. That's as red as it gets. But we've learned something today about the Rakdos. They often bring a fight of morality over just a physical one. They love to make spectacles in as many ways as possible. And the Boros keep finding them, fighting them, and sometimes love watching them. The Rakdos love trying to defile a Boros warrior and his values, because they know that they can touch their red hearts so easily, and it's so fun to see their white values crumble. But Rakdos, goofball that he has become, was ready to fight Boros, just because he wanted to, and only Gideon and Tiny Bones will ever be able to ride him. That's how epic this moment of Gideon the Boros fighter riding Rakdos into battle, that in just one set they repeated it because Tiny Bones is cute. But okay, you can see how Rakdos would allow a few transgressions. No worries though, the two guilds aren't friends. In this case the Boros were easily tempted to start picking a fight with the Rakdos, or at least to threaten them with an all-out war. If the assassin from Murders at Karlov Manor wouldn't be found in a day, the Boros would have started an all-out war on the Rakdos gold. But of course that never happened, so Ravnica still stands. And now the Boros and Rakdos continue to have just small wars. The Boros still have an entire workforce meant to learn to fight the Rakdos in guerrilla warfare. They're just a bit more chaotic, and the most rowdy Boros warriors are allowed here to vent their anger. So it's a useful house too. The Izzet and the Gruul are part of a control triangle, with Gruul as its base together with the Simic. The two standing guilds, the Simic and the Izzet, understand the Gruul and each other through their connection with the Gruul, but they're also often set on their difference with the base guild. In this case the color blue stands against Gruul to control it from running rampant. It sounds weird that the Izzet will control the Gruul, so let's see how it works here. The Izzet love a little tomfoolery, but they also know that great explosions should go paired with cleaning them up. You need to keep improving on your ideas to help society build. And Gruul seems to do fun stuff, but they're also here to destroy beautiful Izzet constructions. The Izzet would rather create a disaster that destroys their laboratories than have the Gruul do it for them, so they build protections from them as much as they can. The Gruul have a simpler statement. To them the Izzet just fiddle around with theories and cower at the feet of a dragon. To them they don't have to care too much about the Izzet because they're not physically strong. If a laboratory is in the way of their frenzy, then so be it. The Gruul even go as far as to burn down all the ground beneath old Izzet factories. They know that it was tainted by the scent of progress, so they cleanse the earth by burning it down repeatedly, probably to the amusement of Izzet mages who love to watch fire burn the earth. And the Izzet do love the Gruul in many ways, because of their fire, but also because of their magic. Niv-Mizzet is known to try to analyze Gruul's skin runes, and to this day hasn't been able to decipher their workings. Meanwhile the Gruul just have to get angry to activate their power tattoos. I really love when these split cards tell us more about guild relations. Hustle and bustle are both energetic activities. They tell us that both guilds are about action. But bustle shows the action of a prepared warband attacking the city, and hustle shows us the reaction of a police force coming to defend it. And this is the case for the meaning of the words too, because hustle refers to vigorous work with a sense of urgency and focused effort, and this is exactly Izzet, because they focus their action in their creative work. Hustle is often a frantic action because there's often a deadline attached. Well, here the deadline is made by the bustling Gruul army. Bustle is all about the noise and movement around a busy environment, and often doesn't mean a focused effort at all. It's more about a lot of activity happening at once from many arms and legs, like people moving around. That's also why hustle targets one creature to defend or attack, and Bustle just gives your creatures the authority to attack with +2/+2, trample, and turning a hidden creature face up. The Izzet focus their activity, the Gruul just let it cascade. The Dimir and the Orzhov form an allied triangle together with the Azorius. You can imagine how these three guilds form the controlling heart of the city. While these two guilds aren't obvious allies, their shared secrets and manipulation means the two guilds speak the same language. Their black mana shines through in almost the same manner, so that they have discrete partnerships and often help each other with their shared goals. The Dimir and Orzhov are parts of two triangles in fact. Together with the Izzet, the three guilds would form the perfect criminal organization for busting banks. Think about it. Bomb the bank, steal from it and use the money. So actually these two guilds should be the best of friends now that I think about it. Both guilds have a strong focus on spirits, but where the Orzhov spirits are still often in power and just sometimes are bound to others for eternity, with the Dimir it's more often the latter. They employ spirits that have lost their minds or whose names have been forgotten, so that they can be more easily controlled or herded towards selected victims. In a way, the Dimir is about controlling more so than the other two guilds in this triangle. The Orzhov often respect the Dimir as they are basically a mirror to them, which also makes them a threat in all that they attempt to create. Their order is constantly endangered by the Dimir's machinations and infiltration. To them, Dimir that do not answer to hierarchy should be destroyed. Meanwhile, the Dimir find a bit less respect in their rotten hearts. They found that the structure the Orzhov preaches so much about is just a facade for their rotten tiny minds, and they know that they're really the ones holding onto the strings. Yes, a Dimir agent can be bought, but the best agents will always be under the house's wings. Still, the two guilds keep working together. Before the Phyrexian invasion, they spied on their invaders together through Teysa, who had learned the Phyrexian language and had managed to get close with Phyrexian commanders, so that the two guilds could share in their knowledge together. This gathering of information and infiltration of other guilds through diplomacy is how the two guilds mostly find their touchpoints and will always stay close to each other, even though really that's because the two guilds prefer their enemies close. If Ravnica were a world of pure color logic, these two guilds would be perfect friends. The Izzet and the Simic combined share the blue color, and red and green are great friends too. But the Izzet are chaos in motion, forging new discoveries through unpredictable bursts of genius. The Simic, on the other hand, believe that the best solutions are already embedded in nature, waiting to be refined. Red's freedom clashes with green reverence for natural systems, and the two guilds should be at odds. And yet, time and time again, they find themselves fighting for the same cause, the right to experiment without restriction. The Azorius and Boros see unchecked research as dangerous, constantly shutting down projects that push too far. But for the Simic and Izzet, pushing too far is the entire point. They won't work together outright, both believe their path to discovery is superior, but they understand that as long as the other exists, the world is a little more open to possibility. Their differences become clear when looking at their Vedalken researches. The Simic's Gyre engineer describes his process. As I contemplate what is, I dive ever deeper into depths of possibility. Then I set an experiment in motion and watch the truth rise to the surface. A careful approach, understanding before doing. The Simic gather knowledge slowly, ensuring their changes are sustainable, each step a controlled evolution of the last. Compare that to the Izzet's Beam Splitter Mage, a Vedalken who copies any spell that targets him, multiplying his own chaos. Why refine a single idea when you can test 100 at once? Why wait for results when you can create them in an instant? Vedalken are about control, about a perfect future. The Izzet Vedalkens just learn to look for perfection by controlling what other Izzet mages do, while the Simic Vedalken have learned to push the boundaries of what's possible for the Simic. On a world as crowded as Ravnica, resources are finite. When a wealthy Orzhov patron needs an answer to a problem, biological or technological, they might go to either guild, and the one they don't choose, that guild loses funding, opportunities and prestige. So while the Simic and Izzet rarely oppose each other outright, they constantly compete for space to innovate in. Plasm Capture captures this tension perfectly. A Simic mage counters an Izzet spell, absorbing its energy to fuel their own creation. The art shows Forel halting one of Niv-Mizzet's fire blasts, not to destroy it but to harness it. The Simic are reactionary, adaptable. The Izzet are initiators and spontaneous. The conflict isn't personal, it's just part of the process. Research and development puts their approaches side by side. The Simic's research carefully prepares for the future, integrating new ideas into their systems. The Izzet's development doesn't wait. It forces the opponent into a choice: strive for chaos now or hand over knowledge. Both guilds strive for breakthroughs, but where the Simic invest in long-term perfection, the Izzet do first and refine later. And yet, for all their differences, they share one undeniable truth: that Ravnica would be a duller place without them. If the guilds of Ravnica were a grand performance, the Rakdos would be the fiery, blood-drenched spectacle, while the Dimir would be the whisper in the dark that lingers long after the curtain falls. Both guilds wield death as a tool, but their reasons for doing so could not be more different. The Rakdos revel in destruction, their killings a form of grotesque entertainment, while the Dimir use death as a silent instrument of control. Despite their differences, the two guilds often do find their interests aligning in unexpected ways. Nothing announces chaos quite like a Rakdos performance, and the Rakdos trumpeter ensures the audience hears nothing else. With its fire-breathing ability, it roars louder with every burst of mana, overwhelming its enemies with sheer force. But while its noise is a declaration of power, it also serves an unintended purpose: a distraction. As the Dimir leader himself once remarked, or probably many times more, the louder the Rakdos, the quieter we become. The mindless brutality of the Rakdos makes them the perfect cover for the Dimir's operations. Who would suspect a whisper in the night when the city is still echoing with the screams of a Rakdos revel? Only fools ignore the Rakdos, and the Dimir count on that foolishness. Both guilds deal in death, but the Rakdos and Dimir view its aftermath very differently. This Rakdos enchantment makes it clear: let the Dimir worry about witnesses, for the Rakdos screams count as applause. Mechanically, Cavalcade of Calamities rewards a swarm of smaller creatures, ensuring even the weakest minions contribute to the bloodshed. The Dimir, in contrast, clean up after their work, eliminating evidence and leaving no trace. The Rakdos thrive on chaos, the Dimir thrive on control. Nothing better illustrates the opposing philosophies of the Dimir and Rakdos than the split card Rise and Fall. The Dimir, half Rise, manipulates the battlefield, returning both a creature from the graveyard and one from the battlefield to their owner's hand. This calculated move ensures control over the tempo of battle, allowing the Dimir to manage threats while gaining resources. Their dead are never truly lost, just repurposed, bent to their will. Fall, on the other hand, is pure Rakdos chaos. It forces an opponent to discard 2 random cards, throwing their plans into disarray, even yours. No strategy, no careful selection, just destruction for destruction's sake. This card is the perfect metaphor for their methods. Where the Dimir plan, the Rakdos react, reveling in whatever carnage unfolds. You wouldn't say the Rakdos are reactionary, but in this case, against control, yes, they would react, but more so because of an action against a reaction. If Rise and Fall showcases their differing mindsets, breaking and entering reveals their preferred methods of infiltration. The Dimir's breaking forces an opponent to mill 8 cards, a psychological attack that instills fear and destabilizes the mind. The Rakdos, ever unsubtle, make their entrance far more dramatic, Entering reanimates a creature from the graveyard and unleashes it immediately, an unstoppable force of destruction. The flavor tells a chilling story. A Selesnyan elemental, once a force of harmony, is resurrected, twisted and enraged. The Dimir might have stolen it for their own ends, but it is the Rakdos who set it loose. Ensuring its return is nothing short of catastrophic. Few comparisons between these guilds are as striking as that of their assassins. Massacre Girl, a Rakdos legend, cares nothing for precision, only for body count in a way of, murdering them. Her ability spreads a wave of -1 counters across the battlefield, cutting down friend and foe alike. In contrast, Atrada, the Dimir assassin, eliminates with purpose. She strikes with deadly efficiency, exiling her targets without leaving a trace and even recruiting more killers to her cause. Yet, despite their differences, these two murderers found respect for one another. Killing is an art, after all, and proficiency in the craft transcends guild boundaries. The Rakdos and Dimir seek power in entirely different ways. The Dimir use control and information, turning knowledge into a weapon. The Rakdos, in contrast, wield unpredictability itself as their strength, letting chaos reign and embracing the destruction it brings. Yet, for all their differences, their shared black mana ties them together. Both embrace ruthlessness, using death as a means to an end. Where the Dimir orchestrate the shadows, the Rakdos set the stage on fire. And in the end, both ensure Ravnica will never find peace, only the next act in an endless performance of death and deception. The Gruul, who reject civilization, often come into conflict with the Azorius. They seek to maintain law and order throughout Ravnica. The two guilds are exact opposites, or at least so it seems. Yet they're not as vividly enemies as the Gruul and Orzhov or the Azorius and Golgari. Gruul's red nature goes against all the Azorius stand for. They're never acting out of free will, everything should be ruled, and that's exactly what the Gruul are against. The two guilds could find common ground though, in the sense of community that they feel. Still, you shouldn't take this like the two are ever friends. This Gruul Goblin Shaman shows us how the Gruul view the Azorius. They're often the target of their anger when they let go of their restraints. Gruul goblins often wake with a story that they don't remember. Often when they open their eyes, they are surrounded by wounded or dead Azorius law mages. And it might be because the Gruul attacked them, but it's also because the Azorius tried to stop them from breaking the law. So who's really the bad guy here? This Azorius spell is the perfect counterpoint to the Gruul's aggression. A law mage wields a spell that seems like glowing words from a law book, striking down a massive Gruul warrior. Mechanically, it deals 3 damage to a tapped creature, showing that the Azorius only respond when provoked and not really in a strong way, waiting for an aggressor to act before delivering at least swift justice. The Azorius do not seek battle, but they are always ready to defend their order with the weight of law. But when someone could be breaking the law in the future, they could attack. The Gruul have little patience for the intricate legal maneuvers of the Azorius. Their response? A well-placed blow. Skullcrack deals 3 damage that cannot be prevented while also stopping life gain. This brute force approach negates the Azorius' careful defensive strategies, reinforcing the Gruul belief that when words fail, fists don't. Perhaps the purest show of Gruul ethos, Skark Goliath, is an enormous 9/9 trampling beast that crashes through defenses like nature reclaiming a city. They bind us with their laws, we free ourselves with nature's fist. For the Gruul, true power lies in unchained might, not words and bureaucracy. The Gruul and the Azorius couldn't be more different. The Gruul hate authority and see strength as something wild and untamed. They don't want to rule over others, they just want to tear down the system they believe has trapped everyone. The Azorius, on the other hand, believe the only thing keeping Ravnica from falling into chaos is strict laws and careful control. To them, the Gruul are proof of what happens when people stop following the rules. There's not much room for understanding between them. The Gruul want to destroy everything the Azorius built, but sometimes the Azorius actually use the Gruul's destruction as an excuse to push even stricter laws. If the city is in chaos just enough, then obviously more rules are needed. So while the Gruul think they're fighting the system, they might actually be helping it grow stronger. When the two clash, it's not always a fair fight. The Gruul don't plan, they attack fast, and with everything they've got, smashing buildings and throwing the city into disorder. The Azorius rely on paperwork and procedures. They react after the damage is done, issuing arrests and new laws. This frustrates the Gruul, who see them as cowards hiding behind rules, while the Azorius see the Gruul as nothing more than proof that they're right. Even though these guilds have nothing in common, their conflict mirrors a deeper struggle between instinct and logic, freedom and control. The Gruul's red mana represents raw emotion and destruction, while their green side believes in survival of the fittest. The Azorius with their white mana value structure and community, while their blue side brings careful planning and intellect. These forces will always clash. The Gruul will never accept the Azorius rules, and the Azorius will never let the Gruul run free. The battle between law and chaos isn't one that can be won. It's just part of what keeps Ravnica alive. On Ravnica's color wheel, the tension between the Izzet, Dimir and Rakdos forms a unique balance of power. They are forces of transformation, reshaping the foundations of the world in their own ways. It's different from the Golgari cycle of life and death, which keeps both the Gruul and Rakdos in check. Instead, this struggle revolves around blue and red, knowledge versus chaos. This dynamic prevents both Dimir and Rakdos from ever fully taking control, because the Izzet introduce something neither can handle. The Izzet hold a strange kind of power over the two. With their blend of blue and red, they counterbalance both extremes. They bring logic to Rakdos' reckless destruction, making chaos into a tool rather than an aimless force. At the same time, they inject too much unpredictability for the Dimir's comfort. The Izzet push the boundaries of what can be known, sometimes exposing secrets the Dimir would rather keep buried. It's a game of control that none of the three can fully win. During the War of the Spark, the Izzet and Dimir found common ground. They both valued knowledge, though for very different reasons. The Izzet sought it through an invention and experimentation, pushing reality beyond its limits. The Dimir, ever watchful, gathered knowledge through secrecy and manipulation. Together they could unlock truths that no one else had even dreamt of yet. The card Bond of Insight captures this idea perfectly. The Izzet create what has never been imagined, while the Dimir would steal knowledge straight from dreams if they could. The flavor text drives the point home. I might even let you remember some of them. It's a perfect Dimir move, offering knowledge but never without a price. Definitely not every interaction between these guilds is friendly. When the Izzet set out to crack the puzzle of the implicit maze, the Dimir worked from the shadows, disrupting experiments just enough to make sure they wouldn't be left out of whatever knowledge was uncovered. Psychic Strike reflects this, countering spells while milling 2 cards, an attack on both the present and the past, maybe even the future, ensuring that knowledge remains in Dimir hands. And when Bolos arrived to take Ravnica for himself, the Dimir did the same and went into full sabotage mode. No mage in the city was safe, not even the Izzet. Experiments failed for no reasons. Projects that had been months in the making collapsed overnight. The Izzet were left scrambling, confused and frustrated. Sinister sabotage was happening all over the city, and the Dimir were most definitely behind it. Of course, sometimes the Izzet and Dimir work together, but not openly. Destroy the Evidence tells one of those stories. Everyone knew that the Dimir had wiped something off the map. Everyone also suspected that the Izzet had hired them to do it. Whether it was an experiment gone too far or a discovery that needed to disappear, the Izzet had their hands clean and the Dimir had done what they always do best: erase the past. The two guilds never fully trust each other, but they understand one another in a way no one else does. The Izzet's view: the less we see of the Dimir, the more we know they monitor us. And the Dimir's response: they are true seekers of knowledge, but their tools are chaotic and lacking in direction. It's an uneasy balance, but one that ensures that neither guild can fully take control or know everything. I have saved 4 guild relations from the Orzhov. This is because they're the classic enemy colored guild between white and black, between the self and other. First, let's put them in their triangle, the triangle of control, which they share with the Dimir and the Azorius. The Dimir find a brick wall when trying to topple the Orzhov structures. The Azorius love that structure, but could never really get rid of the corruption within the syndicate. In fact, they'd often act just within the lines of the law, creating toxic environments nonetheless. Both guilds do create a firm societal structure, but one that would never be truly good for the people if they're left unchecked. And in that manner, the Dimir are actually the guild of the people here. The Azorius are aware that the Orzhov are an evil guild. Ravnica says that the many wings in the sky almost never bear good tidings. That's because syndicate messengers often tell us that something bad is about to happen. The Orzhov are dealing about, so that can't be a good sign. But the two guilds act in the same manner. They form bonds and weave deals that cannot easily be broken, all to create a structure that puts them on top. Even death cannot stop the guilds from their rules. The Azorius just have rules in place that force you to live on in afterlife, often having ghosts work for them for near eternity because the law states it. The Orzhov write up deals that could have you shackled for eternity, only adding to the time you need to work to pay off your debts. So when Ravnica was attacked, the two guilds quickly came together to form rules to protect their city. They agreed that order benefits everyone, as long as you enforce those rules. Both guilds aren't really about action, so it's funny that they're all about it here. But that's also because they're just so passionate about order. If we move out of the triangle of order and look at what's directly outside of it, chaos, we see the Rakdos, and here we have a pair that shares a color, black, but definitely doesn't get friendlier from it. Both guilds do value power, but they see that the other squanders it for the wrong reasons. The Rakdos are a danger to themselves, to others, and to wealth, so they must be controlled. And the Orzhov try to control, so that's the worst thing the Rakdos can think of to do. Their power must be taken from them, and so it happens one way or the other. Act of Treason shows a late Orzhov aristocrat being taken to the carnivals. He loves his new life here as he can be the center of attention, and the Rakdos love him for betraying what he once stood for, getting down there with people just because he loves power so much. Honestly, the Orzhov still respect him for that too. But the Rakdos can go too far, even with the Orzhov, because they have some values, believe it or not. They value the death and its rights, and the Rakdos also value death, but more so the dying, as we have seen so often today. The Orzhov really don't want a Rakdos member to get invited to one of their funeral parties, because really it isn't a party and the dead should not be let to die so easily again. They should be embalmed and let to stay forever under the Orzhov thumb. In Push and Pull we see another way of the working between the two macabre guilds. The Orzhov often help push someone to their deaths or through a window, which can often be the same thing in a city with skyscrapers. The Rakdos often revive them to have fun one more time, read to have revenge, so they turn two creatures back to fight once more. The story here is that two people were pushed to their death, apparently, and now they're running up the building from the sheer force of hatred. There isn't anything more Rakdos than that, and on a deeper level the card works too. The Orzhov force people into submission by pushing them, and the Rakdos entice them by pulling them. We end with two enemy guilds, who are often employed by the Orzhov but very much resent them for everything else. Both the Simic and the Izzet have their blue color close to the Orzhov, where they would usually use white or black as a tool for control. Either the self or the group can be used to form society, but together they form a power vacuum for all the wrong reasons. The Simic, for example, only use their control for their mission to improve on nature, to think about how to make it stronger, and the Orzhov trade intellect for obedience and strength for money. Meanwhile, the Orzhova, the Simic do have a deep history, but they're so obsessed with life, while death is such a long part of it too. As I said, the Simic are often paid by the Orzhov to do their bidding. For example, they created a slime that could double Orzhov workers and soldiers, only to take their life force and feed it to their own biochemical stores. But still, the Orzhov were grateful. They wouldn't care if their soldiers died sooner anyways. Meanwhile, the Simic knew that copying soldiers was the least of their abilities. The Orzhov are so obsessed with their city that they don't care to look at what's beneath. So meanwhile, they worked on slimes that could grow from anything, even from mana or raw spells. Teysa was aware once that the Simic started to release their biochemical weapons and hoped they'd never team up with the Golgari. Still, the Simic kept working on learning from their opponents, at least the ones they defeated. Problem being that they'd never get through the endless lines of soldiers to get to the Orzhov leaders. Still, they strengthened their standings against the Syndicate. Until their leader was brutally murdered by someone at Teysa's party. And though the Simic knew there had to be an explanation, the Simic still stood completely against the Orzhov once more and will never really become anything more than distant enemies. And the last two guilds, the Izzet and the Orzhov, couldn't really be more opposed in philosophy. Yet they still find ways to interact. The Izzet are reckless visionaries constantly pushing boundaries for the sake of progress, while the Orzhov fear change, preferring an eternal grip on power. And despite their opposition in theory, the two guilds still often find ways to work together, because the Orzhov value Izzet magic and value results more than principles. The Izzet are sometimes paid by the Orzhov to animate entire districts of rubble, clearing out unwanted slums by infusing them with chaotic magic. But magic is unpredictable, and the Gruul often find these animated ruins and teach them vengeance, sending them back into the city to tear it apart once more. The Izzet don't care, the experiment worked and that's what matters. The Orzhov don't care either, the job got done and they've already collected payment. The only losers here are the people who once lived in those places. Izzet mages often clash with Orzhov enforcers in the streets of Ravnica. Whether because of unpaid debts, stolen research or simply an experiment gone too far, the Izzet don't respect Orzhov laws, seeing them as bureaucratic roadblocks to innovation. And the Orzhov see the Izzet as reckless fools who will burn the city down if left unchecked. And yet, every now and then a storm mage finds themselves in Orzhov debt, and what is a contract but another kind of formula? The Izzet know that true knowledge comes at a cost, but the Orzhov know that cost can be extracted from others. When Niv-Mizzet the Firemind sought to uncover the deeper truths of Ravnica, he was forced to negotiate with the Syndicate for access to ancient texts. Every revelation came at a price, and the dragon found himself playing their game more often than he liked. But the Izzet don't forget, and when the Orzhov's control becomes too strong, when their taxes and contracts threaten to snuff out free thought, the Izzet respond the only way they know how, with an explosion. So no matter how many scientists fall into traps of needing money, they'll still always get out by exploding something. Ravnica is far from a perfect system. The guilds may be built on rigid ideologies, but their relationships are shaped by something much messier. History, ambition and the constant struggle for control, or not control. Alliances shift, rivalries blur, and even the most unlikely partnerships can form from whatever need there is that arises next. So, what do you think? Which guild relationships do you find the most surprising or interesting? Let me know in the comments, and if you've enjoyed the deep dive into Ravnica's politics, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. We're doing deep dives on anything that we can find, so let me know what pieces of magic that you find interesting and perhaps we can get into that. We're just getting started on unraveling the mysteries of magic's most iconic city, and there are way more worlds and cities to still discover. So that's a beautiful thing. I want to thank you for watching and I wish you a nice day. Bye.